Durrans, British motorcycling journalist and intrepid bike tester, prepares himself for combat. Gary Peterson dons some protective kit for a day of exploration on two wheels. These motorcycles are the kings of the jungle. They are the pinnacle of technical advancement at the end of the 20th century and have set the standard for the beginning of this century. The Kawasaki ZX-12 and the Suzuki Hayabusa have both rapidly developed reputations of being right at the top of the food chain in terms of engine performance and high-speed prowess. Out past the Val Dam, and we begin our shootout of these two giants in motorcycling. Which one is the ultimate hyper sports bike? Well, as you can see, we are about to find out. Spectacular stuff. But of course, this is not only a test about top speed, but more of an overall shootout where handling, brakes, suspension and general feeling is taken into account. Technically, both the Suzuki and the Kawasaki are incredibly advanced, with technical innovations that simply lift the boundaries to another level. Talk about lifting it to another level. Both machines have onboard computers with larger memory than the Apollo spaceship had when man first landed on the moon. Quite incredible. In fact, the secret to the immense power output of both of these road burners is the intricate engine management systems, which allow optimum performance from the high compression 4-cylinder motors. Big horsepower for big badass motorcycles. Top speed, well, the speedos are around about 340, but actual speed 308 k's per hour. In fact, there's so little in it on the top speed run, the Suzuki gets the toe and almost comes by the Kawasaki as they flash past us at over 300. On the dyno, the Suzuki tops out at 152 brake horsepower and the Kawasaki tops that with 158 horses. But where the Suzuki really scores is in the mid-range with an arm-wrenching 133 Newton-meters of torque compared to the 128 produced by the ZX-12. Right, time to swap motorcycles.
Yes, man. Gotta go on this, Gary, mate. This is sorted. Well, can you be riding that, mate? I'll have to blow the cobwebs out of it. You ready, man? Yep. Yes.
What is this world coming to? Sorted motorcycles and maniacs aboard them. Great terrain to test these bikes. Just take a look at that view. Mind you, the road surface doesn't look quite good enough for high-speed stuff. Perhaps it's time to get to the racetrack and see what these bikes can really do. Talking about power though, the ZX-12's power is much more up around the top end and revs almost 2,000 revs higher than the Hayabusa. This is almost certainly attributed to the difference in capacity. 1300 cc's for the Suzuki and 1200 cc's for the Kawasaki's. Time for a top speed run, and they come down towards the camera at about 280 and accelerating. Over the crest and on the pipe. Gary on the Kawasaki and Matt on the Suzuki. Speedo buried down around the 340 mark, and they come past the camera side by side. 2 k's per hour. That's the difference at this sort of speed. Enough of that. Get a lot of this. Too 240 all the way up to 250. A bit of a wobbler, and Matt really does appreciate that one. But of course, it's not all about wheelies and burnouts. In fact, it's about overall feeling, handling, brakes, stability. That's really what does count in the world of hyper sports bikes. Now, these behemoths aren't really suited to track work, but this is the ultimate test in terms of handling, brakes and suspension. We know they make big, bad horsepower, and in fact the Suzuki back tire is almost worn out after just one day of high-speed thrashing. Down the straightaway, and there's absolutely nothing in it. On the brakes, the Suzuki able to brake a bit later thanks to some better brakes, but Gary can't resist showing off for our cameras. Matt runs inside him and Gary gets out of the seat on the big Suzuki. That rear tire really has tried enough. Rear tire on both bikes, by the way, a 200 by 17. Huge rubber, coping with huge horsepower. On the brakes, well, the front end dives, they're not really made for this. But with a bit of setting up and tuning, well, who knows, these could be the super bikes for the tracks of the future. Suzuki 2,000 revs lower as they come out of the turns, but able to put that power down, laying big black darkies out on the racetrack. Time for our pilots to change motorcycles. Matt gets onto the Suzuki and Gary climbs aboard the Kawasaki ZX-12. And this is what it's like on board with Matt Durrans as we come onto the straight at the Midvale racetrack. And Gary sneaks past out of the slipstream and goes ahead on the Kawasaki as they jump up and put the brakes on. That Kawasaki does look like it's easier to tip into the corners thanks to a half a degree less steering angle compared to the Suzuki. While Gary's busy pulling a wheelie, Matt managed to get past on that Suzuki and winds it up. 152 horses going down to the back tire. The Suzuki is somewhat deceiving. It looks a lot bigger than the Kawasaki, yet around the track it feels almost nimble and much more neutral as we go through the corners, flicking it right and of course left. It all comes down to who's got the biggest you-know-whats when it comes to riding these motorcycles. He with the strongest right wrist normally wins. Right, time for the drag show. No, we're not dressed in ladies' clothing. In fact, these are wolves dressed in wolves' clothing. Ready for that green light. Get the revs up. 4,000 RPM. Check the lights. And away we go. Suzuki launches much better on the back wheel. Does he keep the power on? Yes, he does. Down towards the end of the strip, and the Kawasaki's coming back. 9.91 for the Zook and 9.92 for the Kawasaki. Just got to make a point that we had in fact blocked off the roads during those top speed runs, so anybody out there that's concerned about us speeding on public roads, we did block off the roads. Joining me in studio are the two crazy test pilots, Gary here, Matt over there. Guys, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much.
First time on Two Wheels Studio. Matt, nice makeup, you're looking good.
Thanks, suits me, do you think so?
The reason I've got you in the studio though is to talk about those bikes and to give your honest opinions on them. Gary, the Kawasaki, we said during the piece that it had a little bit more top end power, but the Suzuki scored in the mid-range. Would you think that's an important thing that people wanting to buy these bikes, do they take that into account?
You know, Dave, I have a lot of friends that have both makes of motorbikes, and you know what, I keep getting asked what is the best motorbike, and you know, in my personal capacity I still feel that the Suzuki is definitely the best bike.
Okay, we're going to come down to who chooses the best bike a bit later on, but I would say, Matt, the important thing here is they're both hyperbikes, and what's important is that they're going to stop making these bikes that go with that sort of speed. Kawasaki and Suzuki have agreed no more of these bikes from next year.
Supposedly so, yeah, 300 km/h top end limit, which is what, 186 miles an hour. Now both of them will push through that genuine speeds. Must be 195 miles an hour they'll touch, so up around 310 k's an hour. So yeah, it could be the last time we get to ride anything quite so quick.
Did you enjoy the shootout? Did you enjoy the test?
I did, I've got to be honest, it scared me, trying to follow this man around everywhere. It's frightening stuff, and I don't know if anyone noticed, but the leather's got a little bit tatty during that shoot. Let's laughing, boys, please.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in a few moments' time as well. Gary, your honest opinion, though, you say the Suzuki is the better bike, but a lot more comes into just what is the better bike at the end of the day. I mean, there's comfort, handling, all that type of thing, but your overall opinion was saying the better bike. But what makes you say that at the end of the day?
You know, Dave, obviously with being out there the whole day on both bikes, the Hayabusa is definitely easier to ride. The only thing that I just liked on it on the track is when you accelerate hard, you tend to slide to the back of the seat. Otherwise, like everything, the brakes are real good. The riding position is comfortable. I like the gearbox. Obviously with the drag, it launched a lot better than the ZX12. The brakes were awesome. I mean, I managed to do some endos on it, which I see you haven't shown. But like I say, you know, definitely...
So you obviously got the wrong shirt on there. What we're going to do, though, we got Matt's scorings. We've done a little scoring there out of 10. I'm going to put these up on the screen. Matt, this is how you actually rated the bikes, and comfort 7 and 6. Obviously, you felt the Kawasaki was more comfortable.
I'd give it the nod, yeah. The thing that lets the Suzuki down for me is the wind protection. There really isn't very much. If you want to cover distance, that screen is very, very low. Makes sense for when you're chin on the tank going for the top speeds, but all other times it's a bit of a pain. Kawasaki is much more comfortable. There's a bit more leg room, seats nicer, more of a stretch for your arms, and more protection.
Handling?
Handling-wise, the Kawasaki I felt was a little bit easier to get to grips with. It's softer on the springs, front and rear. The Suzuki was the one to have at the track, definitely. It was a bit tauter, it was sharper steering. You could go quicker on that, no problem.
A big difference here on the brakes, Matt. This is really where the Suzuki did score. You felt the brakes much better.
Yeah, a lot of bite. As soon as you start getting on that lever, it hauls that bike down big time. The Kawasaki's lacked a bit of feel, which is strange. Kawasaki's I've ridden ZX12s before, and they weren't. The disparity wasn't that big. But this time, yeah, the Suzuki definitely.
On the track, obviously a big difference there. But engine performance, this is just overall performance. And you were saying just before we came to air, you might like to change the score.
Yeah, I was looking back at it and thinking we've got two of the most powerful motorcycles ever been built, and I've given them an 8 and a 7.5. It should be a 9.5 and a 9 or something. But
again, looks and overall finish, you obviously went for the Kawa there again.
Yeah, I think so. It's a personal thing, isn't it, looks? I think that Suzuki, no offence to Suzuki, it appeals to some, but I think it's a bit of an ugly old brute.
Okay, so 38 plays 36.5. Thanks, Matt, for that. Let's take a look at Gary's ratings on the Kawasaki and, of course, the Suzuki. Gary, comfort, you also rated the Kawa slightly higher than the Suzuki.
Yeah, Dave, like I was saying, you know, that the Suzuki is definitely... it's uncomfortable when you accelerate real hard. Same again with the brakes. I definitely felt the Suzuki's brakes were fantastic, especially on the open road, you know. At 300 k's an hour, it stopped a lot faster than the
obviously Kawasaki. For you, what counts more than anything, I guess, is the engine performance.
Yeah, Dave, you know what, I love horsepower. And, no, definitely.
Counts at the end of the day. Okay, so that is the scoring. You scored the Suzuki slightly ahead of the Kawasaki. So it just shows you really, and this is not fixed. This is really the way you felt about it. So Matt, you went for the Kawa. Should be wearing the green shirt. Gary should be wearing the black Suzuki shirt. So a difference of opinion. But when you're spending over 100,000 rand, because the bikes are around 108,000 rand for those brutes, obviously at the end of the day it's a discerning buyer. But you got to admit, it's probably going to be the guy who's a Suzuki fan will buy the Suzuki.
They're both so incredibly capable. They're both so fast. I mean, it comes down to what colour you like. Are you a Suzuki or a Kawasaki fan?
Well, guys, thanks for joining us today. Gary, thanks for your input. Thanks for the wild riding, guys. And let's just take a look at this, because you might actually enjoy this one.
No, I won't.